Hi, everybody. This is Kelsey Ann Lovelady here with the very first part of my How to Use Dungeons and Dragons to Write a Book series. Um, we're going to start with character creation. This is the very first page of the character sheet from Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. Um, I'm going to make this a part by itself because there's a lot to talk about on this one page. I'll get to the other two pages either in one video or in two videos separately. Um, let's get started. All right, so I'm gonna zoom in here quickly, and I'm going to show you each part of the sheet piece by piece. So let's start at the top. So obviously the first thing you need is a name for your character. Um, you can come up with your own name, you can find a name generator, whatever tickles your fancy, you pretty much got it. For this purpose, I am using the character name Celeste Bellicose. Now, if you look over to the right of the name, you're gonna see a box with six pieces of information that need to be filled out. So let's go one by one. First thing you need to do is find character, class, and level. Now, class is what D&D defines as basically your profession. What is this character good at? And level is how experienced your character is at this profession. For the purposes of this, I made Celeste a wizard. And in my head, Celeste has been a wizard since she was 13 years old. And when the book that I'm writing starts, she's 21. So that's 8 years of experience. Therefore, she is a level 8 wizard. Now, there are exceptions to the rule. For example, if you had a fighter character eh, who who specifically worked in competition fencing since they could walk. If they were competition fencing since they could walk, they would be a level 20. But the thing is, competition fencing is not the same as actual fighting. There are rules in fencing, and the threat of death is not constantly hanging over you. So he that character would not have the same experience as somebody who's been fighting on the streets their whole life. So if the character has been doing something like that where they have little to no experience with real world situations, I would cut their experience by half so that a fighter character goes from a level 20 fighter to a level 10 fighter. I would also cut their experience by half if they weren't doing a lot of the work themselves. Say that this competition fencer is a cheater. They bought off their competition or had the shit beat out of their competition for most of their fights. I would cut their experience by half again. So the level 10 fighter becomes the level 5 fighter. So how you choose to experience your characters is up to you guys. You can use what I use or you can come up with something else. Over from that, you see background, which, as you can imagine, this is the life that the character has led up until the point of the story starts. For the purposes of this, I made Celeste a sage, which we'll get into what that background to how that background affects her as a character a little bit later on in the sheet. Player name, I typically don't fill out unless I see a specific actor playing this character in the movies or something like that. So I typically just leave it blank. Race is obviously what kind of race this character is. D&D has everything from half orc to gnome. For most of my books, though, I stick with humans, and the race you choose for your character will affect some of their statistics. But for me, since most of my characters are mostly human, I just don't take that into account. I'll explain what that means a little bit later in the sheet. Next, you're going to see alignment, which alignment is a little difficult to explain, but if you've ever seen those memes where they have 9 characters ranging from lawful good to chaotic evil, that's the best way to sum up how alignment works. It's an idea of this character's morality. So, as a lawful good character, Celeste Bellicose is not only fighting for good, but she believes in the law. It's basically the difference between policemen and vigilantes. Is basically the difference between lawful and chaotic. But yeah, that's how you decide the character's morality. Experience points, again, I really don't really fill out because most of my stories take place within basically a month, and nothing really big can happen in a month. But I would fill it out in case your character's story takes place over an extended period of time so that you can track how that person grows and how they become stronger. That's the only reason why I would fill in your experience points. All right, moving down to the next section of the page, we're going to start looking at character statistics. I'm going to zoom out a little bit here so I can get all 6 statistics in the box. Now, these are the statistics over here, and you're going to see that they're divided into 6. There's strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. Some of these are pretty self-explanatory. Your strength statistic shows how strong you are. Some of them are less obvious. Your charisma statistic informs how good you work in social situations, whether you can intimidate well or whether you can persuade well. So how do you find these numbers? Well, I use the Matthew Mercer technique. Matthew Mercer is the dungeon master for my favorite D&D game, Critical Role, on Geek and Sundry. Check it out, guys. It's seriously awesome. But the way that it works is you're first given a 16 to put wherever you want. I put the 16 in Celeste's intelligence. And then for the other 5 statistics, you roll 4d6. That's 4 6-sided dice, and you subtract the dice that has the lowest number, and then you add the other 3 dice up, and then you put the number wherever you like. Now, this is where it kind of gets fun, because this is where you can figure out where your character is flawed or where they are not so strong. As you can see, Bellicose doesn't have a very high strength, and these are the gifts because that leads to modifiers, which are these little numbers beneath your statistics. Now, what are the modifiers? Well, when you're rolling a skill or saving throw, which are these over here, I'll explain those in a bit, you roll a d20 and then you add your modifier, and if you have to, you add your proficiency, which is over here, and I'll talk about that in just a bit. But you'll notice that because Celeste's strength is so low, her strength modifier is a -1. And that's where it gets fun. So, yeah, it's a lot. These low numbers are real gifts. Like if I had put the 9 in her charisma, it means that she either is an asshole or socially awkward. If I had put the 9 in her wisdom, it means that she doesn't really think ahead and she doesn't really have a filter with what she says. If I'd put it in her intelligence, she's obviously not that bright. If I'd put it in her constitution, she gets sick very easily. She gets drunk very easily. She is more susceptible to poisons and stuff like that. If she has a low dexterity, she's very clumsy, and obviously with a low strength, she's not very strong. Now, the proficiency bonus is determined by the level of the character. Because Bellicose is a level 8 character, she gets a proficiency bonus of 3. Now, when do you apply the proficiency bonus? Well, you're going to see this list here, these 2 lists here. These are saving throws, these are skills. Saving throws you roll when someone is trying to do something to you. For example, if someone is trying to push Celeste, she would have to make a strength saving throw to see if she can push back against them and stay upright, or if she gets knocked to the ground. Meanwhile, skill checks are just you trying to impose onto other people. Like, if I want to convince someone not to try to kill me, I have to roll a persuasion skill check. Now, you're going to see these little dots here, and there are a couple filled in Celeste's lists. These mean that she has proficiencies in these rolls. So where I would normally just roll a d20 and then add the modifiers for her, on these saving throws and these skills, which are intelligence, wisdom, arcana, and history, I would roll a d20, add the connecting modifier, and then add her proficiency bonus of 3. So that's how that works. Now down below, you're going to see this little box right here. This says passive wisdom, and in parentheses it says perception. When you make a perception check in D&D, you're specifically looking for something. But your passive perception is when you're not specifically looking for anything, but like you see something out of the corner of your eye. So how do you find your passive wisdom? You start with 10 and then you add your wisdom modifier. I forgot to change this and I'll explain why I forgot to change it. But Celeste's modifier would be 3, so technically she would have a passive perception of 13. She started off with a passive wisdom of 12 because this was not originally 16, this was 14. I'll explain why it changed to 16 in just a bit. Moving on over, we're going to look at these boxes right here. You see armor class, initiative, and speed. Armor class is how difficult is it for people to hit Celeste when they're attacking her. So how do you find armor class? When you're not wearing specifically armor, you start with 10 and then add your constitution modifier, which is 1 for Celeste. If you are wearing a specific armor, they're going to give you a number to start with, and then you add your dex modifiers. If you're wearing like leather armor, you start off with 12 and then add the dex. But yeah, that's how that works. Initiative. Initiative is how quickly can Celeste act when a fight breaks out. So how do you find initiative? Well, when a fight starts, you roll a d20 and then you add your initiative modifier, which in this particular case is half of Celeste's level plus her dexterity. So 4 plus 2. Speed is how fast you can move during a round of combat. Now, in D&D, a round of combat is 6 seconds. That's how long it takes for everybody in the fight to go. So in 6 seconds of combat, Celeste can move 30 feet. Moving down, we're going to see her hit point, which is how... this is basically how many times can Celeste get hit before being unconscious. You do not actually die when you hit 0 of your hit points. You become unconscious. So Celeste has hit points of 49. How did I find that? According to the player's handbook, when you start at your first level as a wizard, you start with 6 hit points. After that, for every single level that your character is, you roll a dice that is connected to your character's class and then add their constitution modifier. Because Celeste is a wizard, her dice of choice is a d6. So I roll basically 8d6. Well, no, 7d6 because the first level her hit points were already determined. So I roll 7d6, and I add my constitution modifier 8 times. No, 7 times. Sorry, guys. And then I just add all those numbers together to get 49. Down below, you're going to see hit dice. When Celeste suffers an injury, during a short rest or a long rest, she can use her hit dice to get her hit points back. So she has 8d6, and every time she takes a long rest, which is 8 hours of sleep, she recovers half of the hit dice that she used. So if I used 2 of her hit dice to heal Celeste, she gets 1 of those d6s back after 8 hours of sleep. Over here are death saving throws. Now this is where it gets important. Once a character's hit points hit 0 and they become unconscious, they have to make death saving throws. To fail a death saving throw, you have to roll a d20 and you have to roll 10 or lower. 3 death saving failures and you die. A success is... Some people argue about this, but a success for some people is you have to roll 3 natural 20s in order to come back to consciousness. If you roll anything in between a 10 or a 20, you don't die, but you don't succeed, if that makes sense. Other people say that so long as you roll above a 10, it's a success, and you'll come back after 3. Moving down, these are Celeste's weapons that she gets to choose from. Now, as a wizard, she got to choose her starting weapon between a quarterstaff and a dagger. I went with a quarterstaff for her. And because she is a wizard, she's proficient in quarterstaff, so she gets her +3 proficiency bonus. And what that means is when I roll a d6 for bludgeoning damage with the quarterstaff, I add 3 to her attack roll. So let me clarify that. When you attack, you have to roll a d20 to see if it hits. Depending upon the weapon, you add either a strength or a dexterity modifier. I think for quarterstaff it's strength, but it might also be dexterity. Well, no, it's strength. But then I would also add her +3 proficiency bonus. And if I hit my target, which means if I roll above their armor class, I would do 1d6 of bludgeoning damage. Now, it's important to take a look at what kind of damage you do, because some characters are resistant to certain damages. If you are a character who is a barbarian and you rage, you are resistant to bludgeoning damage, cutting damage, piercing damage, impact, basically anything impactful that doesn't have to do with magic, which means that the damage would be cut by half. Meanwhile, her blowgun is not something that Celeste is proficient in, so she doesn't get her proficiency bonus. And that is a dexterity weapon, so I would add her dexterity modifier rather than her strength modifier. And that only does 1 point of piercing damage. But if it's got a certain poison in it, it can either make someone go unconscious or kill them on the spot. So that depends. And that depends on whether or not they make their Constitution saving throw. Gonna go back to the top here and take a look at the background. This is where we get more specific with the background of the character. Now, as a sage, Bellicose got to decide what she was a sage in. You have certain branches that you can be more knowledgeable in. I chose for her astronomer, but you can also be an alchemist, sage, or whatever you like. On these particular traits, you can either roll the dice that are connected to finding the trait and just get something random, or you can choose whatever fits your character best. Celeste is a little bit of a mixture of the two. So, part of her personality is that she loves a good mystery. So, okay, cool. Ideals. This goes in connection with her alignment. Since Bellicose is lawful good, I had to choose alignments that were either lawful or good for her. And I chose beauty, which basically says everything beautiful leads us to the truth, which is a good ideal. Bonds is like her connection to people, and she believes that it's her job to protect her students. And her one flaw is that she is easily distracted by the promise of information. So that's a pretty big flaw. Moving on down, we have features and traits. Now, this is where you put anything that has to do with your character's level in their specific class. As your character gets higher, they get more skills and more features and more traits. So I'm not going to go too deep into these because they're very specific to the character and the class. But if you just look at the player's handbook, you'll pretty much find everything you need to know. Moving on over to this middle box here, these are any equipment that your character may have. This covers their funds as well as other stuff. As a wizard, some of the starting things that Bellicose gets to have is a component pouch, which holds things that she'll need to sacrifice for casting certain spells. Some spells require a certain amount of money to be spent, others require gems to be sacrificed, others may require blood, I don't know. She also has a scholar's pack, which has a certain type of equipment, which is talked about in the player's handbook. I'll talk about it more if people really want me to in a later video, but for now, we're just going to move on. And spellbook is what she looks to and reads when she has to learn her spells for the day. I'll explain more what that means when we get to the third page of the character creation, because that talks specifically about spells. Also, as a sage, she has a bottle of ink, a quill that's supposed to be knife. I forgot the N. I was kind of writing this in a hurry in preparation for the video. A letter from a dead colleague asking a question that has yet to be answered, and some common clothes for her to wear. And it also said that she has 10 gold as a sage, but that's more than 10 gold. Well, that's because as a wizard, you have a starting wealth. And how do you find your starting wealth? Depending upon your character's class, it's said in the book. As a wizard, Celeste has 4d4 times 100 gold. So I got 13 total, rolling a d4 4 times. I multiplied that by 100, and then I added the 10 from her sage background, hence 140 gold. Other classes have different numbers. I think if you're a monk, you don't multiply anything by 100. You just roll your d4 4 times because, you're a monk. You're a person of God, or gods, depending upon how you worship. You sacrifice material goods when you join the order. So this is where you keep track of what they basically come into contact with and collect. Now over here are your any other proficiencies that you may have and your languages. In D&D, you obviously have languages like Elvish and Dwarvish and Gnomish and Undercommon and stuff like that. If your world is taking place in something more like modern day 21st century America, you can use actual languages like I have. I have Bellicose knowing English, Latin because of her spells, Greek also because of her spells, and Japanese because of a friend of hers. Now, I said I would talk about why this wisdom went from a 14 to a 16. Well, as a level 8, one of her features and traits was that she got an ability upgrade. And an ability upgrade says that once you reach a certain level, you can either add 2 to one of your 6 stats, or you can add 1 to 2 of your stats. I chose to add 2 to her wisdom. So that is the very first character sheet of character creation with D&D. Next time I'm going to talk about the second page, which talks more about, the character's background and their appearance. Anyway, I hope you guys really liked this video. I know I had a lot of fun making it, and this is something I feel very passionate about because this has been a lifesaver for me ever since I started using it. So I hope this has been helpful to you guys, and I can't wait to see you guys in the next video. Bye!